The 2021 NHL Draft Class was weird. Not only was the draft class pretty average in terms of quality going in, the pandemic definitely didn't help things, and I think made things a lot worse for a lot of players in their development. But that did not stop NHL teams from making some massive mistakes, and I would argue none made a bigger mistake than the Edmonton Oilers, who at the time galaxy-brained their 2021 draft class, and since then, it's only gotten worse. So join me throughout the rest of this video as we go through what could have been for the Oilers in their 2021 draft class, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Heading into the 2021 NHL draft, the Oilers held the 19th overall pick and didn't have a pick until the 4th round. So that first round selection was vitally important. And the draft went pretty normally, with Owen Power going first overall, Matty Beniers going number 2, and even though we saw some big surprises inside the top 15, that's par for the course. And the Oilers were in a prime position to select a future starting goaltender. Even though Sebastian Cossa had been taken 15th overall by Detroit, a big-time Swedish goaltender named Jesper Wallstedt was still available. Mostly because there was a big run of forwards after the Sebastian Cossa pick, with Brennan Othmann, Zach Bolduc, Chaz Lucius, and Fyodor Svechkov, all forwards getting picked before Edmonton. But then the Oilers would surprise us all, trading down in the draft just a couple of spots with the Minnesota Wild, going from 19th overall to 21st. But this was a shock because we didn't really know what the Oilers' strategy was going to be. Did they still want a player like Wallstedt? Did they think that he'd be available at 21st overall? It was kind of up in the air. But at the time of the trade, I wasn't exactly a huge fan of it, to say the least. I apologize to the headphone users watching this. I was pretty in shock.
Wait, a trade? No! Edmonton, you are literally going out of your way to have the worst offseason possible. Jesper Wallstedt, a franchise goaltender. Ken Holland, you idiot, you idiot!
Usually, I'm a pretty big proponent of teams trading down in the draft, for the Oilers getting an extra 3rd round pick here, but it was about who was available for the Oilers at the time, and of course, who would be taken with the pick that they traded. At the time, the Oilers goaltending wasn't a complete disaster. Mike Smith was putting up a .923 save percentage in the North Division, which feels like a fever dream, by the way, that whole thing. But Mike Smith was 38 years old at the time, and even though he was playing well, that wasn't going to continue forever. They had a young Stuart Skinner in the pipeline, but as we would later see, he's really only had a good rookie season and a few good playoff stretches, but most of the time just being a bit underwhelming. So to pass on the opportunity of drafting a Jesper Wallstedt, I thought was a pretty crucial mistake at the time, and a team like Minnesota seized the opportunity. I'm not personally one to rank goaltenders super high unless they're in that elite status, but Jesper Wallstedt was one of those players that really rose up the ranks for me and ultimately finished 10th in my rankings back in 2021. Why I had him so high was a combination of speed, of skill, of course, size in a goaltender, which does matter a lot, but in Jesper Wallstedt's case, he was something that just continued to blow me away with the poise he was showing back in his draft year. It feels insane to think about now, but as a draft year goaltender, Wallstedt was a starter in the SHL, getting a .908 save percentage in 22 SHL games and a .923 save percentage in 2 World Junior games. Wallstedt was already proving himself not just among the best in his age group, but the best among pro goaltenders already. And even though you hadn't put up dominant numbers, to even be the starter for your team in the SHL as a draft year goaltender is insane. Obviously, compared to a nation like Russia, they don't have as many fantastic draft year age goaltenders, but even in Russia, it's hard to be the starter for your KHL team, and you have a lot more great prospects to choose from there. What Wallstedt was able to do to rise as the cream of the crop there in Sweden already was just extremely impressive to me. And what do you know? The Minnesota Wild traded up a couple of spots to select Jesper Wallstedt at 20th overall. Minnesota as well having a bit of need in terms of the goaltending system long term. Wallstedt was there to shore things up. But who did the Oilers select instead? Of course, they went through all this effort to trade down in the draft, gain an extra 3rd round pick, so they were pretty confident in who they were selecting at 22. So, who was it? Oh, yeah, let's talk about this, shall we? Trading down in the draft, the Oilers selected Xavier Bourgault, who I still enjoyed in his draft class, was somebody that I thought had some interesting potential, but in terms of the improvement, especially going to the pros, it just wasn't there. Bourgault is one of those sad cases of a player that just hasn't been able to find his identity at the pro level. In junior was something that I liked the scoring upside and the smarts in his game, but needed to improve the defensive positioning and actually bring that skating to a level that could bring him a little bit more intensity as well. But I just don't think that's really come. Even though he's proven to be a solid AHL scorer, I think the defensive game and the efficiency just hasn't come a ways enough to make him a valuable piece. He's not quite offensive enough to earn top minutes on an NHL team, nor good enough defensively to be a bottom six player either. But especially for the Oilers at the time, Bourgault just wasn't really much of a need. Sure, he was a solid prospect, but definitely not somebody that they could have really used long term like a Jesper Wallstedt. So not only did they have the chance to draft Jesper Wallstedt and just completely balked on the play, they also traded the pick that eventually would be the Jesper Wallstedt pick, and Minnesota's looking very happy they did that right about now. Even though it has taken some time, Wallstedt has become the goaltender that I thought he would be back in 2021. This year, starting to finally win a ton of minutes and looking confident, which is the biggest thing and the biggest improvement, I think, in Wallstedt's game. The skill level, the potential has always kind of been there, but I think at the NHL level, just finding that speed, finding that consistency have been the biggest problem up to this point. But at 23 years old, you guys can see what he's doing so far this season, winning games over a player like Gustafsson, who's a pretty good goaltender himself, and in 9 games, a .938 save percentage, a 1.93 goals against average, and among the best goalies in the league. What's super impressive to me is that Wallstedt is already 18th among all NHL goaltenders in goals stated above expected after only playing 9 games, which is pretty insane to think about. But that's just how good Wallstedt has been and how many games he's been saving for this Minnesota team. Granted, they've been playing really well over the last couple months, but I would argue Wallstedt's swagger and how much his confidence has grown has given Minnesota a lot more breathing room now. The thing about Wallstedt is he has required some more patience. I mean, last year was a pretty brutal season for him, both in the NHL and AHL level, only getting an .879 save percentage through 27 games. I'll be the first one to admit that I was a bit concerned with Wallstedt's runway and how much he was going to find himself in the NHL. And even though it's only been 9 games so far this season, you can start to see that turning point finally come now. And this season has been a massive stepping stone for him. But that's just the thing. I think in a lot of cases, the Edmonton tried to go for the safer type of projection, going for somebody that maybe could fill a middle six role for them someday at the very best, instead of maybe the weight of a long-term goaltender. But now we're seeing that that project goaltender, that guy that you need to wait years and years for, is in the NHL faster and is already a better player than Xavier Bourgault. And if that's not an indictment towards those safer type of picks, I don't know what is. Especially, again, for a team like Edmonton, imagine how much easier Stuart Skinner's job would be right now if he had a player up to even close of the level of a Jesper Wallstedt. Now, granted, again, Minnesota has played pretty well around Wallstedt, where Edmonton's kind of been a bit of a disaster at points, but still, the talent potential in Wallstedt's game was just so hard to pass up at the time, and I'm still baffled that Edmonton did. And I think that he's only 23 years old and only turned 23 just a couple of weeks ago. He is absolutely just touching the tip of the iceberg right now. In just a couple of years' time is going to be way better than any other option Edmonton could even trade for. That is the craziest part about this whole situation, is that Edmonton traded the pick that would become Wallstedt, didn't even just pass on him, traded away the pick that would have been Wallstedt. In exchange now, they're in a position where they're trying to trade for a goaltender, trying to find anybody that can be just serviceable, and the likelihood of them trading for somebody even as good as Wallstedt right now is pretty unlikely. And I typically agree with the hindsight is 2020 situation, because most of the time it is. That's why I love covering the draft and talking about prospects, because it can be so random sometimes. And I would agree with that in the case of a player like Wyatt Johnston, who, by the way, was drafted a spot later than Xavier Bourgault, going to the Dallas Stars at 23. Another pretty brutal mistake by the Oilers, but at the time, Johnston was projected as a second rounder in most lists, if not even below that. So in this case, I think it's definitely hindsight is 2020. In Wallstedt's case, though, he was looked at as the best goaltender of the draft, a top 20, top 15 guy in pretty much every single list, as he should have been, a starter in the SHL, playing great whenever he played in the World Juniors. Everything was lining up his way. So I don't think it's necessarily a hindsight situation, because I think at the time it still was a pretty weird move to make. But that's now what we're sitting with the trade the Oilers made back in 2021, because not only was it a disastrous move in every single way, it's also still costing them today. It's not like they whiffed on a first round prospect and that was it. They whiffed on what could have changed their franchise completely, which was a player like Wallstedt. Or if they wanted to go even a bit further, a player like Wyatt Johnston, if they needed a forward, could have been been a transformative move. But you look at where the Oilers are sitting in the pecking order with the picks both before and directly after, and it is just brutal all around. Jesper Wallstedt with the pick they traded, even Elise Sell would have been a better selection. Even though he hasn't been perfect by any means, I still think he has a lot of potential, has been tearing up the AHL this season, so I think there is still something there. But of course, they selected Bourgault, and then the very next two picks are Wyatt, Johnston, of course, to the Stars, but also Mackie, Samoskevich, who I think has been a really under-the-radar scorer for the Panthers, 43 points in 103 career games. So it's not even just like the Oilers went for a forward, and he was a pretty okay forward, but not the goaltender they needed. Bourgault was just a complete bust in every way, and if they want to go for a forward, yes, I get that Johnston wasn't projected around that range, was a pretty big reach at the time, but Mackie Samoskevich would have made a lot of sense at 22nd overall, and he would have been a really interesting wing to have for those top-end Oilers centermen. And I think it is a bit cheap to point out picks like 10 picks afterwards, but guys like Olin Zellweger, Riker Evans, even a Josh Doan, man. I mean, imagining a Josh Doan on this Oilers team, are you kidding me? Those picks are definitely more hindsight as 2020, but the Wallstedt selection and how the Oilers completely failed on that, I think is going to haunt them quite a bit here. Yes, I don't think Wallstedt would have helped them in the last couple of Stanley Cup final runs, but having a Wallstedt for this year and the future of that team, I mean, it would change that franchise in so many ways right now. Skinner, Pickard, what they're doing right now in the goaltending department, it's just not good enough. But having a backup option like Wallstedt to be there with that talent, with that potential, thinking about how good the Oilers would be with Wallstedt for the future, it's honestly nasty. In general, I'm just happy for Jesper Wallstedt that this is the year he is finally breaking out, because I think this was a make or break season for him, either to get back to a great AHL level or finally establish himself as an NHLer. He's not just establishing himself, he's establishing himself as an elite one already. Actually, when I think about it, this has been a great year for just breakout goalies in general. Spencer Knight has been brilliant for Chicago this year, back from the 2019 draft. Yaroslav Askarov has been brilliant for San Jose and super entertaining coming from the 2020 draft. And now we have Wallstedt breaking out as well from 2021 and doing it at just 23 years old. But this 2021 draft for the Oilers should be looked at as one of the worst misses in NHL history, at least in recent memory. Not even just with the prospects that they selected, but with what they could have had very easily all around their first round selection. And to put more salt in the wound, the third round of the Oilers acquired 90th overall to trade back a couple of spots was an absolute failure in Luca Munzenberger, who was a German defenseman, an overager, and something that was okay in the NCAA, but hasn't even come close to playing pro hockey in North America. And as a third round pick at 90th overall, just a brutal selection for the Oilers on top of Bourgault. To make matters even worse, the only player from that 2021 class the Oilers had that even played an NHL game has been Shane LaChance. And you know what I'm about to say next. He didn't even play that game of the Edmonton Oilers. They traded him to the New Jersey Devils, and I think he'll be a pretty decent bottom sixer there, but not for Edmonton. But those are my thoughts on an Oilers draft class that is continuing to haunt them in so many ways right now. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you enjoyed the breakdown, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Comment down below your thoughts on this 2021 class for the Oilers and what you think could have been for them. How good you think they would be with a Jesper Wallstedt in that system. Man, things would be completely different for them. But let me know your thoughts all down below. Of course, if you guys want some more videos, you can become a channel member here today by hitting the join button next to the subscribe button or hitting the link in the description down below. I'll be having a member Q&A here pretty soon, so you guys can be a part of that as well if you want to. But a big thank you to all the channel members. Their names will be up here on the screen. If you guys want even more content, you can click up this card for all my trade content right in one playlist. Make sure you guys share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. And if you guys have any Oilers friends or family that you want to inflict some pain upon, you can share the video to them as well. But I will see you in the next one. Make sure you guys have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.